Yeah, now it's okay. And today I would like to speak something more, tell you something more about the alien plants in Iceland. And to start with, maybe I will just give a short introduction to what I will be talking about. So we will start with very basic definitions. We will try to figure out what are the alien plants, how we can define them, how we can divide them into groups. Then we will try to ask a very important question. Do they really matter? Is that an issue, the alien plants, at all? Because, well, there are different views. Some people think that, well, alien plants, it's nothing. It's just a plant, and we don't have to worry about. And, well, I will try to discuss this question on three examples, actually. I will use Fallopia japonica and two species from Heracleum genus to discuss if the alien plants are really something that should worry us. Then we will start the main part. So I will try to introduce you to the alien flora of Iceland. We will start with some basic statistics. So this part is called alien flora in numbers. Then we will move to spatial patterns of the alien plant distribution in Iceland. Afterwards, we will be talking about some major environmental factors that are controlling the distribution of those plants in Iceland. We will also have a look on the dynamics and the temporal trends. So we will try to figure out what's the dynamics of the immigration and how it was in the past, and what's the future of this immigration. And then at the end we will try to see the possible impacts of climate change on the alien plant distribution in Iceland. Well, to start with, we will start with some very basic definitions. I think that it's rather easy to understand that in every area we have some plants that are indigenous, so they are native to this area. They just evolved in this area or came here without human involvement. And there are also some alien taxa, in this case alien plants, and we define them as a species or whose presence in a given area is due to either intentional or unintentional human involvement. Or alternatively, they can also came to the area without any human involvement, but from an area in which they were already classified as alien. This big group of species, so the alien species, can be subdivided into two major groups, namely the casual aliens and the naturalized aliens. The difference is that the casual species cannot sustain self-replacing populations over a long period of time. They just come and go. Usually they last for 1 season or 2 seasons, and they just died out. But in contrary, the naturalized species, they are able to sustain self-replacing population. They just propagate on their own. They produce offspring regularly and freely without any problem, and they are able to stay in the place when they arrived, without any intervention, without any human intervention, or even despite this intervention. Sometimes, well, we just want to remove them because we think that they are noxious or not wanted, but well, they still persist, and that's what we defined as a naturalized species. Well, this is a way to show it graphically. We can see that here we have a big arrow showing the influx of alien species. Most of them are casual aliens, so they will just they will not survive for a very long time. They will come, they will stay for 1 season or 2 seasons, then they will die out, and these are the casual aliens. Then the subset of this big number of species will survive for a longer time, and we call them naturalized aliens. And out of naturalized aliens, there is a very tiny proportion of the species that have a potential to make some harm to the environment, to the economy, to the infrastructure, or even to the human health. And we term them invasive aliens. Well, so I think that the most important question at the beginning is to realize if the alien species, if they are really problematic, do they really cause problems? Is that an issue to have an alien species in an area? And I will try to discuss that on the example of the general example of the British Isles. They are quite close. We can see that in the British Isles we have 1,500 native species and more than 1,600 alien species. So you can see that alien species, alien plant species, already outnumbered the native species. Out of these 1,600 aliens, about 500 is now well established in natural ecosystems. And well, there are also some plants that are invasive, and the damage and control costs because of this invasive species are really enormous. And I will show that in a minute on the examples. Very nice example of an invasive species, not only in the British Isles but also almost all across the Europe, is Fallopia japonica. This is called in English the Japanese knotweed. And well, it was imported to Europe in 19th century as a very peculiar ornamental plant from the Far East. It was even shown on some exhibitions in the end of 19th century. It was very expensive to buy this for the garden. But after some years, people realized that this species is really highly invasive, mainly because of the growth rate that can reach up to 10 centimeters per day. This is something when we consider the plant growing 10 centimeters per day. And this growth rate, this is mainly the rhizomes. That's the problem. It's not the shoots, but the rhizomes, something that is below the ground. The rhizomes grow through, well, we can say that they grow through everything. They grow through concrete, brick walls, asphalt, everything. They damage foundations, road network, railway tracks, and all sorts of infrastructure. Well, just some examples. Here we have a brick wall totally destroyed by the Fallopia japonica. Here we have a house with the garden invaded by the Fallopia japonica. And we can see that now the Fallopia is moving into the house. This is not a fun, because now when someone is trying to buy a house in Great Britain, then you have to first think if there is Fallopia in the garden. I read in some British newspapers that they were people that they lost all they had because they bought the house that was infected or affected by the Fallopia, and then the house after 10 years you could just, it has to be rebuilt almost because it was so damaged by the plant. Here the Fallopia is growing through the asphalt close to the shopping mall. And here is the damage because that's mainly the infrastructure. And here we have the natural environment. This photo was taken in Poland, in the southern Poland. That used to be a small mountain river. We can see that the valley of this river was invaded by Fallopia japonica, and as we can see, it's growing all over. It outcompeted all the other plants, and nothing is left. It's just the one species that has left here. That's how it looks like in some places. Here we have a gardener with a nice garden of Fallopia japonica. He cannot grow anything else because here is the Fallopia coming into your cellar through the foundations. But the real problem is to remove the Fallopia. Just when the soil become affected with this species, then the only way, or the only effective way, is to soil excavation. We have to remove the soil about 1 or 2 meters of the topsoil, and then the soil has to be treated with either with strong chemicals or with high temperature, and then the soil is usually replaced, as we can see here in the garden. They remove the whole soil, and even they put here, you can see here the barriers for the protection, to protect, because this is possible that here close to the foundations or here close to the fence there were some remains of rhizomes, and this barrier here is made to prevent the rhizomes to grow into the new soil. As we can see, in Great Britain, the Japanese knotweed is treated like something like a biological danger, because it's something like an area with restricted access when they treat the area with different chemicals to remove the fallopia. What are the costs? This is the official estimates according to the Great Britain Not Native Species Secretariat, and well, just two very nice examples. 2-hectare development site in southern England, £2 million to remove the fallopia completely. The construction site of the Olympic site in eastern London, £70 million. This is something. Well, the total cost of control of Fallopia japonica, or the impact on the British economy, is estimated for almost £200 million per year. But the total cost of invasive species in England is over £1 billion per year. So that's not cheap. Do we have Fallopia in Iceland? Well, we did have. It appeared just twice, in 1949 and 1966 in the east. But I think at the moment, with this climate we have now, this species hasn't got much chance to survive, because it hates when the frost is coming late. When we have it starts to develop the leaves, and then when the frosts came during this period, then it's totally destroyed. So we are safe as far as Fallopia is concerned, but there is another species that we already have in Iceland. This is Bjarnarkló, so the Heracleum antegasianum. And here is the photograph of the Bjarnarkló I took in Eastern Carpathians in 2005. This is a very young plant. That's the beginning of the June, and it's growing in a ditch. So it's, well, I'm 1.83 meters, and it was higher, and the ditch was about 1 meter. So it was already 3 meters high, but it gets much higher, I can assure you. But well, and here we can see the distribution. But this is not the worst thing about the Heracleum, that this is tall. No. The worst thing about Heracleum is that it contains furanocoumarin. That's a very dangerous chemical compound, and it's present in, I think, in at least 2 invasive species from this genus, and it's phototoxic. What does it mean? It means that after close contact with this plant and the contact with sunlight, because that's the very important thing, that the EUV irradiation have to appear after the contact with the plant. Then we have something like these painful blisters, and they start after 48 hours since the exposition. Then the scars, or the marks, like here on after the 5 months, they last up to the 6 years. Of course, if the sap gets to the eye, then the blindness is the only option. But what is the nasty thing about these burns is that this long-term sensitivity to sunlight is very common and lasts very long. It means that even though we try to heal this wound, and it should look like that after 5 or 6 months, then next year we go, for example, to, I don't know, to the beach, somewhere where it's hot. We try to take some sunbathing, and then the whole story starts again. And again, and again, and again, each time the skin have a contact with the sunlight. So that's something really really terrible about the plant. It's also not easy to remove this Heracleum mantegasianum from the area. This is photo taken in Poland, and we can see that here it's growing all over the place. And this just is sign here warning: do not touch, do not approach, because you can be badly hurt. And in some places this is the only option, because the areas are so invaded that there is no other option to control, or there are no available money to control the plant. The other species from the same genus, which is not that harmful because it hasn't got much of this furanocoumarin, it's Heracleum persicum, Trothlaclo. It's also present in Iceland. And it's called Tromsø palm because it started the invasion in Tromsø in Norway. And what about the distribution in Iceland? Here we have Heracleum mantegasianum, and as we can see, it's already quite widespread in the south, in the west, as well as in the north. And its presence in Iceland dates back to 1997, and we can say that this is already naturalized, so it's able to sustain this self-replacing populations. The same thing is about Heracleum persicum, Trothlaclo. It's just in the north, but well, this is something really that should worry us. This Heracleum mantegasianum. Maybe it's not too late to eradicate the species, but well, the urgent actions should be taken to try to fight this plant. Otherwise, we can end up with some invasion of Heracleum. Now I will move to the second part, and I will be talking about the alien flora of Iceland in general. As it was said during in the beginning, that what I will be talking about, all these things are based mostly on the paper we published in Flora recently. And I would like now to introduce you just to the basic research aims. We just wanted to provide up-to-date information on vascular alien plants in Iceland. Try to look closer to the spatial patterns, how they are distributed, and if there are some hotspots of the distribution and diversity. Then we wanted to define to try to find some environmental factors that are controlling this distribution of those plants in Iceland. And then try to predict if the climate change will have an impact on alien flora of Iceland or not. And we recorded alien plant taxa found in Iceland from 1840 to 2012. Thank you. Well, as for basic statistics, at the moment we have we recorded 336 alien plant taxa. This number slightly changed since last year, because since last year I think we have 3 or 4 more taxa. So now it's actually 339 or 38. Then 82% of that number, these are casual aliens, so these plants that just come and go. But more than 70% are naturalized, so they are permanent here. They just got the permanent residence permit in the country. And then 2 taxa can be considered at the moment as an invasive, so the Lupinus and the Antriscus sylvestris. When it comes to the most represented families, these are Asteraceae, Poaceae, Brassicaceae, Rosaceae, and Fabaceae, and the most represented genera are listed here. Well, life forms, hemicryptophytes and therophytes are the dominating life forms. The other are quite rather less frequent than the previous ones. We also produced something like a checklist of alien vascular plants in Iceland, and this is just a catalog listing the species, the important synonyms, vernacular names, mode of introduction, if it was deliberately or accidentally. The D stands for deliberately, A for accidentally. Then we have the date of the first and the most recent record according to our database. Species origin, status of naturalization, so if it's naturalized or casual aliens, and the distribution in the major phytogeographical provinces of Iceland. What's the origin of alien plants in Iceland? We can see that the origin of alien plants in Iceland mirrors the origin of the native flora. So the alien flora of Iceland is mainly of the European and Asian origin. There are almost 10% of the species that came from North America. Some of them come from Africa, well, mostly from the Mediterranean basin, and just 2 species are of South American origin. Well, what are the conclusions for this first part? The taxonomic composition of the Icelandic flora is very similar to that of the continental Europe. The 5 genera which were found to be the most diverse in Iceland, they are also the most diverse in Europe. And the majority of alien plant taxa is or European or Asian origin, as I mentioned just before. Now something more about the spatial distribution. We wanted to define the patterns of alien plant distribution and identify some hotspots, if there are some hotspots of this distribution and diversity. And to do that, we used the circular neighborhood method. And well, I will just briefly tell you about the method itself. If you want to think about the richness, species richness over an area, we can divide an area into small or big, well, into the plots. Like here, for example, we have the squares, and here we can see that this plot, the plot is rather big. It's 1 degree, 1 degree. So the length of the here it's 1 degree. When we can see that the high diversity is observed within this plot, but the raster, so the resolution of this picture is relatively low, so it doesn't tell us much. When we decrease the raster resolution, and we can have very minute rasters, then we can say that, well, the distribution is covered nicely, but the pattern of diversity has been completely lost because we cannot see the differences in the diversity here. And what we did is we used the circular neighborhood method, and it consists of using a fixed diameter circle which is centered on each raster, and it assigns a value to the cell. And well, here the value for the cell is 1 because just one place is affected by some alien species, but here, for example, it would be like 4 or 6 even, because well, as we can see, this method repeats itself for each cell, and then after repeating for each cell, we get a picture which looks like that. And this methodology surely allows us to maintain a high degree of resolution without losing the pattern of diversity, which is quite nice and comfortable for some biogeographical studies. Then what we can see here is distribution and diversity of casual alien plants. This is rather interesting because we can see that they are not evenly distributed, with the clear hotspots close to the main centers of economical centers and the population centers, so the Reykjavik and Akureyri and other places that are inhabited all across the Iceland. And here we have the distribution and diversity of naturalized alien plants, and we can see that they are much more widely distributed. Of course, there are some hotspots, but they are not as clearly visible as it was in the previous example. Well, what's the conclusion? The distribution of alien plants just exhibits a very clear spatial pattern with hotspots of occurrence and diversity confined to the major areas of settlement. Finally, we try to figure out something more about the environmental factors controlling the distribution of alien species in Iceland. To do that, we employed some climatic data obtained from the World Climate Database, as well as we used a species distribution model based on presence data. It's called Maxent, and I will talk about that in detail a bit later. What we can see here is a graph showing the altitude above sea level and number of observations of different alien plant species, and we can see that it decreases sharply with the increase of altitude above sea level. So the altitude above sea level is one of the major things that control the distribution. The same is for the temperature. We investigated actually quite a number of different parameters, but I'm showing just the annual mean temperature. Also here we have the variation range within Iceland, and we can clearly see that the alien plants, they prefer the high, the places with the relatively high annual mean temperature. Our results seem to indicate, therefore, that the altitude and all the temperature-related variables are the most important factors that govern the distribution of alien plant taxa in Iceland. Now, a few words about the dynamics and the temporal trends. We wanted to assess the rate of alien plant migration to Iceland. That was the main aim. And to do that, we calculate the cumulative number of taxa and plotted that against the time in years. We also try to predict the yearly accumulation, and we base this prediction on linear regression. That's the results. And here we can clearly see that, maybe I will start with explaining. The small dots here are annual counts for new taxa records in each year. Here this line, this dark line, solid line, is the cumulative number of taxa. We can see that it's growing with a rather stable rate. And here, marked with some crosses, this is a predicted total number of taxa up to the 2050. And we can see that in 2050, we will have about 400 taxa, alien taxa in Iceland. And that will be probably the threshold when the alien flora will start to outnumber the indigenous flora. Yes. What are the conclusions? The alien taxa, the number of alien plant taxa is increasing in Iceland with a reasonably stable rate of 3 new taxa per year. That's the main conclusion. But the other thing that should a bit worry us is that when we compare this immigration rate in Iceland with the immigration rate for other countries in the continental Europe, we will see that this is comparable. For example, for the Czech Republic, it's 4. For Poland, it's 5. For Germany, it's also 4 point something. And we in Iceland, which is relatively, or should be relatively isolated, we have 3. So this is quite a big number as for Iceland, at least in my opinion. And at last, the impact of climate change. We just wanted to predict what would be the impact of climate change on the alien flora in Iceland. And we do that employing the maximum entropy method for analyzing presence on the records. And now I will just try to introduce you to the methodology. What's the aim of such analysis with this modeling? Usually our aim is to estimate a target probability distribution of a given species, but finding the probability distribution of maximum entropy. What does it mean, maximum entropy distribution? It means the distribution that is most spread out, maximally spread out, or closest to uniform. That means that the distribution has a maximum entropy. We start with the species occurrences, and this is the input data, as well as we also need to have some environmental data, like, for example, mean temperature or, soil type or something like that. This is everything comes in GIS format. Then the model makes up a space on which the maximum probability distribution is defined, and then at the end, we get output data and the probability distribution of maximum entropy for a given species. Now I will try to show that on examples. Here is the present distribution of Alex alexensis. That's a point map of distribution. So this is not the squares, this is just the places where it grows, marked with some dark spots. Then that's the predicted present distribution of Salix salaxensis, and we have probability from 0 to 1. And we can see that these areas with high probability, they really correlate quite nicely with the present distribution of Salix salaxensis in Iceland. And well, of course, we created another map that was based on the climatological models. But this is the final outcome. So these are the predicted changes in the distribution of Salix salaxensis in 2050. And well, to explain that, the green areas, which are rather scarce here and here in Eyjafjörður, these are the areas of low impact. So they already, at the moment, they are suitable for the species, and they will stay as they are in 2050. Then we have the area marked with yellow, and they are outside of the climatic niche of the species. And we have the red areas, and the red areas, these are the new suitable areas. So the climate in these areas will change in such a way that will fit the species very nicely. And well, therefore, we can assume that at least part of this area can be suitable for the further future colonization of Salix salaxensis in Iceland. And the same simulation we did for Lupinus. Here is the distribution map, point distribution map, and here we have this predicted distribution, the probability map. That's here, and changes. Again, green areas. Here, nothing is changing, so they are suitable and they will be suitable in the future. But what should worry us is the red areas here, 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 and here, and these are the new areas that are potentially that will be potentially quite suitable for the species in the future. Actually, here the lupin is present already, so well, it fits quite nicely to what we have at the moment. The conclusion: the climate change may have a major influence on the flora of Iceland, and mainly by promoting the establishment of invasive plant populations in many different areas. Well, and thank you for your attention.
Við þökkum Pavel kærlega fyrir hans fyrirlestur. Eru spurningar, athugasemdir í bækur? Menn vilja koma með, hér svo vel.
Yes, thank you very much. This was very interesting indeed. I have one question regarding the environmental factors. You showed these graphs of altitude.
Yeah.
And I wonder, did you correct for the area, available area?
Yeah.
I mean, they were mostly present at low altitudes.
Yeah.
And then decreased sharply.
Yeah.
I wonder if that form would change if you corrected for available area at each altitude. For example, at high altitudes, you only have very limited areas. Yeah,
but well, but that won't change anything, much, because well, they just do not appear on the high altitude, okay. And then the main shape of the graph won't be changed.
Maybe it will not be as steep. I mean,
maybe it won't be as steep, but well, there will be surely there is a correlation between that, and it's a very clear. Okay. Yeah.
My name is Hjörleifur Guttormsson. I thank you very much for your speech, and I would like to ask you about methods of control against invasion of species in different countries. If you can tell us something about it. I have heard, for example, that in New Zealand there is a strict control against introduction of alien species.
Yeah.
What about European countries and elsewhere? Thank you.
Yeah, well, it depends on the country, but I think recently, at least in the EU, they start to control more and more. There are some national programs that are concentrating on the so-called biosafety and some safety measures that should be taken when importing, like, for example, soil or wood from other countries, because that's the most dangerous goods that may carry out some propagation of the alien species. But, well, the control of alien species itself might be relatively difficult, because usually most of the new alien species, that they are brought very unintentionally, so they just appear like out of nowhere, but usually they disappear. On the other hand, when talking about the control, we in Iceland, but not only in Iceland, also in the continent Europe, the most invasive species were not brought accidentally; they were brought when on purpose. And that's the main thing, that, well, maybe we should think more before we introduce a species to an area, if it can be potentially dangerous for the environment or for the people, and, well, just have some second thoughts before we import some new species. And that's my point of view.
Thank you very much for a most interesting presentation. I have two questions, if I may. First of all, on the graph where you show both the annual additions and the cumulative numbers, there was one year that was so high, that was around 2,000.
Yeah.
Is there a particular explanation for that?
Well, no. But I think this particular high, I think here, that was accumulation of not of immigration, but accumulation of research. Actually, about 2004 or 2003, in the herbarium, both in Akureyri and we have a guest from Norway, a professor from Norway, and he just identified, I think, about 10 new species, and, well, that's the problem here. So, well, this is something very exceptional. We shouldn't pay much attention for that.
My other question was: do you think there are sufficient grounds, in your opinion, based on this work, to set much more stringent rules? Well, I don't think we have any rules at the moment for for plants that people are allowed to plant out by the summer houses.
Well, it depends on the priorities. If the priority is to have a nice summer house, then we shouldn't. But, well, if someone want to have the like summer house and all around planted with bjarnagróf, for example, yeah, well, if that's the priority, well, then. But for me, from my point of view, it should be introduced, because, well, otherwise everything is going out of the control, and if the people are allowed to plant and as they wish, just anything, then the problem of invasive species, which is still relatively mild comparing to what we have in continental Europe, well, this may just be more and more severe with time. And for some species, like, for example, for this Heracleum mantegasianum, I think that we have just several years that left to try to eradicate the species. If not, it will just start to spread as lupin or something like that.
My name is Sigurður Magnússon, and I will thank you for a good presentation. As you know, in Iceland we have a relatively high grazing pressure from sheep. Did you find any? Sorry. Did you find any correlation or do you think there is a great effects from the sheep on the establishment of alien species?
Well, I didn't take that into account because that was a very general research what we did. We just wanted to show an outline of the phenomenon and just to count the species and how they are distributed and so on. But I think that might be interesting. No, well, in terms of propagation, you mean that the sheep may carry the propagules? Yes, that's what you mean.
No,
No.
I mean they can control the spread of
Well, yeah,
or establishment.
Well, yeah, that's possible. And I think already things like that were introduced. At least I know in southern Poland, there are some programs that are using sheep not to control the distribution of alien species, but to protect some plant communities that are very prone to disappearing because of the succession. And then just to stop succession and stop the development of the trees, they just use sheep to control and to preserve some valuable or rare plant communities. Yeah.
Tími fyrir loka spurningu. Einhvern sem að brenna inni með spurningu?
Einar Þorleifsson, I was thinking, is it possible to make some kind of a model or to produce a list of the most likely invasive species which would be problematic in the next 20 years? Or
well, yes and no.
Do you have plans for the future?
Yes and no. Well, we analyzed almost 20 different species in our paper, and you can see that the predicted distribution maps in the supplement, electronic supplement. But the main limitation is that you need to have at least 50 different places in which the species appear for the model to be relatively reliable. The more occurrence points you have, the better. So if you have just 3, 4, 10 occurrence points, then the model may not be as exact as it should be. Of course, one can say that we can use the occurrences points from outside the Iceland, for example, from Europe or from the United States or from Alaska or from somewhere. And well, I think this is partially can be done. But there is also another question that should be taken into account, that when we are using these occurrence points from the native parts of distribution, then we don't take into account that when the species arrive to the area, to the new area, well, it always has a time of, like accommodating to the new area. There are some changes in, I don't know, in the physiology maybe, or this is not really known, but this is sometimes the species, they have slightly changed the niche, the ecological niche, when they invade the new area. Maybe not completely, but just slightly. And then the question is if such comparisons with the native area can be justified. Well, maybe not in some cases. So, but I think that from my point of view, if you want to hear what my point of view is that the two main species I consider the most dangerous is the Salix salaxensis. That's the one, and the other one is the Heracleum mantegasianum, which is a real pest, because well, Salix salaxensis won't harm you, but the Heracleum mantegasianum, well, this is really dangerous, not only for the environment, because people tend not to care, because well, what is environment? This is just something that is growing outside. But when they consider that, well, they can be hurt, yeah. For example, all my children can be hurt because they just went out to the environment and they got these terrible blisters and things like that. Then maybe that provokes some second thoughts.
Yeah, I just asked for 1 minute, because just to follow up the last question, there is a working group within the Ministry of Environment, where I'm a member of, and I think more people here in this room. We are working towards a list of species, which species are absolutely not allowed to import, and etc. So this type of work that we have been hearing you telling us about is very, very important and we can use that in our work.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. And there is all other work ongoing. We really have to consider the biology of the individual species to evaluate their potential invasiveness.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also the important thing is to consider that there are some species that have been already naturalized, but they are still not invasive. But maybe this is the last time to eradicate them, because they can easily go out of the control in the near future.
Yeah, exactly.
And that I think that's the most important thing as for now, because importation is also an issue. But this problem was termed an invasive depth. So there are some species that are growing around, that are just starting to spread. They were already imported, but now they are just waiting to become invasive. And I think that's the most imminent problem we will have to face here and all over the place.
Að lokum vil ég þakka Pavel kærlega fyrir komuna og öðrum gestum. Næsta hafnarþing verður auglýst